Hello, and welcome to Stand With Us TV Live. Stand With Us is working around the clock supporting Israel and fighting anti-Semitism. Thank you for joining us. We have a very important show for you today. Coming up, I'll be joined by Arnold Roth, a man who has been relentless in the fight to bring his daughter's murderer to justice. Melbourne-born Arnold Roth and his wife Frimet, a native New Yorker, live in Jerusalem where, with their children, they settled in 1988. Their daughter Malki was murdered at the age of 15 years old in August of 2001 in the bombing of the Sbarro pizzeria, a massacre that was masterminded on behalf of Hamas by a Jordanian woman, Ahlam Tamimi. Tamimi was convicted in 2003 of multiple counts of murder and given 16 life sentences. She was released, however, in 2011 as part of a trade for Gilad Shalit, at which time she returned to Jordan, where she received a hero's welcome. The Roths have been campaigning since 2012 to see Tamimi extradited to face federal charges in Washington. These efforts have turbulent dimensions, involving a considerable degree of interactions with officials of the U.S. government's three branches and continue until today. Thank you so much, Arnold, for being with us today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Rose.
So you are spending your life, and your wife is spending her life fighting for justice for your daughter, Malki. And today we have this opportunity to learn more about your struggle and about the history of what happened. First, if you don't mind, tell us about Malki.
Malki was the first of our daughters, but she was the fourth of our children. She was the meat in the sandwich. She came before three sisters and after three brothers. That's only something that we can say looking back. What she was this very sweet, very empathetic, very caring, very lively, vivacious person who touched a lot of people's lives and who was always looking to do good things for other people. Everything that I've just said sounds trite, and you would never talk the way I've just talked about a child who's with you, but she's not with us. She was taken from us before she reached her 16th birthday, and the goodness of her life is still with us, but it creates an aching space inside us.
The loss, the tragic murder of Malki, along with the others who died at the Sbarro pizza bombing, it's part of the reason we started this organization, to be able to make sure that the stories are told and not forgotten. So I'm glad we're here together to make sure that people don't forget, that we always remember the life of Malki and how she touched so many people.
One of the really awful things, though, about the impact that terrorism has had on so many lives is that, for the most part, its victims aren't remembered. And in fact, one of the real motivating factors, when we were sitting on the floor, my children and I, Frimet, my wife, was really completely devastated and out of things during those awful days. But we spoke about the need to have people know about Malki's life and to never allow what happened to turn her into a statistic. The dynamic has changed over the years. When we lost Malki, we thought when 30 days later the Twin Towers and the Pentagon came under attack, exactly 30 days after, in fact, the day of the Azkara, the memorial service that traditionally Judaism has 30 days after someone's life is taken, is lost, we thought that there'd be no memory at all of Malki because people would be focused on the horrifying events of that day. But as time developed, our own view of what had happened, our own personal perspective changed, because it turned out that not only was there an act of terrorism that exacted an awful price, in this case, a tremendous number of young lives, and a location, the center of Jerusalem, on a school holiday summer afternoon, that was almost the exact mirror image, the opposite of the evil that walked into the center of town that day. But before long, we discovered that it's even worse than that, because the woman who masterminded this has gone on to become a hero. And that led us into where we are today, trying to get justice done.
So it was August the 9th, 2001, that this horrific massacre took place. Are you in touch with some of the other families, or were you in touch with them?
We have been over the years. One of the families was our next door neighbor, our daughter and their daughter, our Malki and our neighbors Michal, were together that day and were murdered together that day and are buried side by side. With the other families, we've had some contact, not with all of them, but everyone has their own world of dealing and coping. And over time, we've learned that it's not that easy to share this kind of this grief and this loss and the pain and the anger. So for the most part, other than the people with whom we've become very close, and there's a small handful, we don't really have that much we don't have that much to do with the others. The numbers are really horrific. 15 people were murdered outright that day. 16th woman has remained in a vegetative state ever since, and 140 people were injured, some of them horribly.
Terrible, terrible. I just want you to know that even young people, when we say the Sbarro pizza bombing, they know. Young people around the world know about it. So, in terms of memory, I think this is a collective memory that we share. I just wanted to say that because, you should know you're not alone, that there is a greater memory that we share. And this is one of these horrific moments in Jewish history.
There's always another side to that, though, Roz. And the fact is that the massacre at the Sbarro pizzeria is considered to be a high point in the trajectory of Palestinian Arab terrorism, and in particular the Islamist part of it. A smashing victory, a real blow to the solar plexus of the Israelis. It's a word that has become very well known in the Arab media for precisely the opposite reason. It would be very comforting for me to be able to say to you, yes, this great loss was so overwhelming that no matter where you come from, people can feel the pain and the loss. But it's really not true. The people who did this have gone on to become heroes in a true sense, in a literal sense, receiving massive payments from the usual sources, Arab governments, the Palestinian Authority. And in the case of my daughter's murder, of the actual mastermind who orchestrated the attack, she had her own TV program for 5 years. And she's still a major celebrity in an Arab country quite close to where I'm sitting at this moment.
Yes, so there is that dark side, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. Before we go to the life of Ahlam Tamimi and the fact that there hasn't been justice served since 2012 or 2011, but let's tell the story, if you don't mind. Let's talk about the Sbarro pizza bombing. What happened? Tell our audience who doesn't know what happened.
This was a Hamas operation. It was orchestrated by Ahlam Tamimi, who was then 21 years old and a newsreader on a Palestinian Arab television station called Istiqlal. The bomb that she brought into the center of Jerusalem that day was a human being, young man with a guitar case on his back that was filled with explosives and shrapnel that included nails, some of which I have in a small box in this room. They came into Jerusalem at a time when the Israeli authorities knew that there was a walking bomb on its way into Jerusalem. There was an alert operating throughout the city, but we were never told. The public wasn't told. We never had the opportunity to say, as we certainly would have done to Malki, don't go out today, stay home. The city was filled with activity. It was the 9th of August was a very hot Thursday, school vacation. In the case of Malki and Michal, they were on their way from where we lived at the time in one of the Jerusalem suburbs, having decorated the bedroom of a mutual friend who was returning from holidays in the United States that day, and on their way to a meeting of camp counselors. They were both involved in that process, in being group leaders of little girls in a youth organization, and they decided to stop off in the center of town, and they loved going to the Sbarro pizzeria. So they were standing there at the counter at 2:00 in the afternoon. Sbarro was filled with people. Young man walked in, having just been brought there by Tamimi. He didn't look out of place. He was carefully disguised to look like an Israeli or a tourist or just some young guy with a guitar that he probably could play really well. And he was standing next to them when he pressed the button and blew the building to pieces and destroyed all of those lives inside the pizzeria and out on the street. By the time he exploded, she was gone from the scene. She makes no bones about it. And as you'll see, Roz, a lot of what I can say about her, I can say pretty fluently because she's been repeating her account, her triumphant account of what happened that day over and again for television and for the social media. So she makes no, doesn't leave you in any doubt that her role was not to go to the celestial virgins or to go to heaven or wherever it is that people who did what she did go, but rather to bring the bomb there, to leave him there, to pay tribute to him, and then to flee. And she fled. She was in a taxi on her way back to Ramallah when the reports already were coming through on the radio of a massive terrorist attack. And she describes, and has done it on more than one occasion, and these videos are everywhere, the jubilation in the taxi, the jubilation when they met Palestinian police on the outskirts of Ramallah, and the jubilation in her own heart. But she had to keep it all quiet because she was on her way to read the news. And at 7:00 that night, she, and I've got the video of this, reported as the main story of the night, of the day, that in a resistance operation in occupied Jerusalem, Zionist settlers, etc., etc. And I guess it must have been hard for her to say, and I did it. She didn't say that until the police came and picked her up some weeks later and then brought her to the Israeli penal system and to stand trial. But she's never denied it at any stage. She confessed to all the charges in the trial that followed. She confessed again and again when idiot filmmakers came to turn her into a hero while she was still in the Israeli prison. She did it when she was freed in the Shalit deal in 2011.
So before we go to that, let's talk about what she was convicted of. So in 2003, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to 16 life sentences. So
correct.
she was in prison. She was in prison from 2003 till 2011. And then she was freed in the exchange for Gilad Shalit. Can you tell us anything more about that?
There were 1,027 prisoners, most of whom were murderers, who were released that day. She was the only one who went from her prison cell via Egypt, via Cairo, where she met the head of Hamas in a ceremonial moment, and then flew as a VIP to Jordan. Jordan was where she came from. It was where she was born and raised and where she had lived until a year or two before this massacre. She had arrived in the Ramallah area in order to pursue her post-high school studies, and she was studying journalism. So that when she returned to Jordan after the Shalit deal, she was unique. She was the only Jordanian who was released in the deal, the only one who was sent back to Jordan. And she was just so highly regarded because of the brazenness of what she had done, which was to say, sure, I did it. I've never denied that I did it. And I am proud that I did it. And frankly, you ought to do the same thing as I did. It's quite a stunning position for a person to take. There has never been a word of remorse, not on any aspect of this, from this woman from the day she did it until today, till this very evening.
Ahlam Tamimi, let's show, if we can now, some footage of her taking credit and her pride in the terrible, terrible terrorism that she was a part of. Let's watch that now.
לא חשבת על האנשים שהיו בתוך המסעדה? הילדים, המשפחות?
لا.
את יודעת כמה ילדים נהרגו בסבארו?
3 أطفال قتلوا في هذه العملية أعتقد.
8.
8. 8.
Okay, so coming back from that, I cannot imagine what it feels like for you, Arnold, to watch her be so brazen and so proud of what she's done.
There's only so much material we can shoehorn into a brief interview, and even if people are really passionately interested in knowing more about her, the amount of material that's available is huge. Over the years, she was given, and she fully took advantage of, her own TV program, produced in downtown Amman, the capital of Jordan, for a global audience that saw her program every weekend for 5 years, praising acts of terrorism, praising terrorists, building up morale, and acting in all respects as if she were the ringmaster of some diabolical performing operation. I've got a lot of that video recorded and kept against the day when we hope to see her facing trial. And of course, I don't watch it in the meantime, but we could spend the next 2 or 3 weeks just binging on a woman celebrating the lives she obliterated and the glory that has come to her as a result.
So people are interested, people care about this, and they're tuning in from all over the world. I just want to remind everybody to let us know where you're from. Let us know in the chat there, in the comments section. We have questions for you about Interpol. So something happened, and that's really the reason I know you personally since I think we met in The Hague when Israel was being put on trial for building a fence to protect Israel against such terrible, horrific terrorism as what happened at the Sbarro pizzeria. But I met you then, and you and I have been in touch over the years, but something happened recently with Interpol. Can you explain to people what just happened?
Yes, I can, but I need to be a little bit careful about this because I don't know all of the details. First thing is to say that the United States brought charges against Tamimi as a result of a request that my wife and I made in 2012, the week after she began her TV career, the career that involved her own program. It took a long time, 5 years, for the authorities in the United States to put that case together and then to announce it. And my understanding is that for most of that time, there were efforts being made to induce America's ally, the Jordanians, to hand her over under the extradition treaty that had been in place since 1995. By the time they announced the charges, which was the 14th of March, 2017, all of those efforts had produced no result. So that she'd been living the life of a celebrity in Jordan, and the Americans were ready to go public with the charges. One of the aspects of the unveiling of the charges, first of all, let me say she was added to the FBI most wanted terrorists list immediately, the same day, only the second woman ever to be there. A reward, which is still on her head, of $5 million was announced soon afterwards. And there was an arrest order as well as an extradition request. Extradition, in simple terms, means that the United States says to countries that have signed into a contract with it, a treaty, please hand over this person to be tried in our country, because under our law, American law, a terrorist who carries out a bombing with mass victims, and those victims include Americans, that terrorist is the subject of American criminal charges and will be tried under American law on American territory and sent to an American prison. So one of the things that the Americans did at that time was to turn to Interpol, which is a communications network that unites most of the police forces around the world, and said, please put her into your system so that if she turns up someplace, the people in that someplace will know who she is and they'll call the local police and they'll have her arrested. That system is called the Interpol Red Notice, and it's a form of alert. So she was on that alert system at least from September 2016, to my knowledge. It might have been earlier. And that really meant that she couldn't travel, because if she had left Jordan, she would potentially face one of these notices that would cause the local police to pick her up. Now, fast forward to what happened in March 2021, and there's not that much I can really say about how or why. I can certainly say what. What happened is that Interpol decided that she would no longer be subject to the red notice. And indeed, from everything that we've understood, she's no longer in the system. I can't really say more than that, as I keep saying, because I don't know more than that. We're hoping that good sense will prevail, and that in some way this will be a step towards justice instead of a step away from justice.
Wow. So we have no idea why, and people are asking why. So if everybody, you mentioned to me when we were speaking before we began the program that everybody knows where she lives. I mean, it's clear. You've seen her balcony, you've seen her apartment. They know where she lives. You know where she lives. Why is this so difficult? What can you say about that?
A lot. The United States has known, the law enforcement parts of the United States, which is a lot of people, have known where she is through all these years. She's never been in hiding for a day. She's treated as a hero in Jordan. Everyone knows her movements. Everyone knows her TV show. Everyone knows where she lives. And despite all of this, she's still there. So what happened? Well, what happened is that Jordan flatly refuses to hand her over under the extradition treaty. Jordan has said, in fact, a matter of days, 6 days, after the unveiling of the charges against her in March 2017, the Jordanian highest court, a court called the Court of Cassation, handed down a ruling which is somewhat strange, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it because I'm hoping that it's going to become an issue that everyone will read about in the near future. But the ruling is that the treaty is invalid. Here are the Jordanians, who are totally dependent on the United States in every respect. They're the third largest recipient of US foreign aid in the world, saying to the United States, sorry, the treaty which was signed in 1995 by the father of our current king, the king then was King Hussein, and the president of the United States at the time, who was Bill Clinton, that treaty, well, for technical reasons, it was never valid, not even for a day. And we can't extradite it because it's invalid. Now, the reality is that the Jordanians have extradited every time they've been asked by the United States. The United States, in a quiet voice, has been saying through all of these years, what do you mean there's no treaty? Of course there's a treaty. And the Jordanian government has said nothing. The only statement from Jordan's government publicly has been the statement by, it's not by its government, it's by that Court of Cassation saying there's a technical defect. You could go crazy with frustration. I mean, that's a danger that I face all the time. You could go crazy with frustration just trying to explain to other people the notion that this country, which is so dependent on the United States, that is so highly thought of in congressional circles, it gets praised all the time for its wonderfulness and the British accent of its king and all of the other wonderful things that make Jordan so special. This country is telling the United States to go take a hike. In the case of this woman, who's really just the same as the other terrorists that Jordan has extradited over the years, except for one thing, that she makes no bones about the fact that what she set out to do was to kill Jews, and in particular Jewish children. I don't know if those words are coming through clearly enough, so I'll say them again. She was all about killing Jewish children. And that makes her, I mean, it doesn't make her anything. It just means that the Jordanian government can't really hand her over to the United States for justice, because that would create, and you can finish the sentence however you like. I don't buy any of that argument, I've got to say. And everything that I've learned about the technicalities and about the politics and about the people behind the scenes convinces me that this is a story that, if only it were better understood, people would be outraged and they would demand that this all changes and that should be handed over for justice. And just before I pause and let you come in, Roz, to ask your next good question, this is really a question for the media. And of all medias, the media in the United States, I don't know why most people watching this interview now will be saying to themselves, I didn't know that. They should know this. This is the most wanted female in the world. Jordan refuses to hand her over to the United States. She's never denied that she did what she's charged with. She killed so many people, most of them children, and she's a celebrity.
So we have some more footage we'd like to share with the audience. So let's take a look at that now.
هناك 16 قتيل صهيوني، دوي الانفجار بالفعل
كان قوي جدا. يعني كانت المجاهد عبد الله البرغوثي اتقن صناعه الجيتار واحترف يعني صناعتها بشكل ان كانت النتائج يعني اذهلت الجميع في تلك الفتره بفضل رب العالمين. قبل ذلك دعني احدثك عن مساله التدرج بالعدد. يعني وانا في الحافله والكل يهنئ بالاخر، مباشره طبعا المذياع قال بانه سقط في عمليه مطعم سبارو، نفذها استشهادي لا يعلم، لا نعرف هويته، سقط 3 قتلى. فأنا مباشرة يعني أنا لا أخفيك أني تضايقت، أردت العدد من بداية أن يكون أكثر، لكن 3 قتلى قلت الحمد لله. فمباشرة بعد يعني دقيقتين والمذيع يقول ارتفع العدد إلى 5. طبعا أنا أردت أن أخفي ابتسامتي، لم أستطع. يعني بعد ذلك يعني ابتسمت، خلص يعني المسألة بفضل رب العالمين ممتازة. الآن كلما زاد عدد القتلى كلما صفق من هم في الحافلة، يعني ولا يعلمون أني معهم. مررنا في أثناء العودة عن طريق حاجز يوجد فيها الشرطة الفلسطينية وأوقفونا، فكانوا نفس الشرطة الفلسطينية يعني يضحكون. يعني أحدهم أدخل رأسه من الحافلة وقال يعني مبارك مبروك علينا، ويعني كان المنظر يعني الكل سعيد.
What strikes me, besides this crazy injustice and the lack of, coming forward with her and handing her over to the United States, is you, Arnold. I'm looking at you and listening to you. You're so articulate. You're so clear. You're teaching everybody about this issue. You're clarifying so much about this. You're so articulate through your grief. You're so determined, and you haven't let go. And I just need to pause for a moment and just give you that your relentless struggle, your fight for justice has never taken a breath. And I salute you for that. Just from one parent to another. I can only imagine what you've been through and how difficult this is.
I'm not going to deny that it's difficult. It's very hard and it's very frustrating, and sometimes it's enraging. This was our daughter, so without trying to make any comparisons with other people, I just want to say that from our perspective, from it and me, there was never any doubt that we want people to remember Mulkey, and we've set up a foundation in her memory, which we're proud of. And we also wanted to make sure that justice would be done. Once this woman was freed, and even before then, when she was on the front page of the art section of the New York Times while still a prisoner in the Israeli system, and numerous other moments along the way as well when she became famous even while she was behind bars. This was exceedingly hard for us because all that we could think about was our beautiful daughter with the goodness of her life buried underground, along with all of the other victims of that horrendous attack. I don't know whether there's ever been a terrorist attack where the terrorists behind it have had so many opportunities to trumpet their bigotry and their hatred and to make this a celebration. I can't think of another example where the celebration has become so all-encompassing and so embraced by the silence of, well, first of all, the leaders of the Arab country where she lives, in Jordan. They could have shut her down long ago. By the same token, they could have addressed the incredibly high rates of anti-Semitism that country has, but they don't, and they never asked to. But then again, I come back to the media. No one can be listening to me now and looking at me and wondering what kind of a grief-crazed, foaming at the mouth lunatic I am, which I'm not, without asking themselves, so how come I'm not hearing about this? Why isn't this on 60 Minutes? Why isn't this in the New York Times? There hasn't been a word about our battle to get this woman to face justice in the United States under United States law with the assistance of the Department of Justice. Not a word about it in the mainstream media, not the New York Times, not the Washington Post, not the LA Times, not ABC and CNN and all the rest, not even Fox, not a single one. So there's something so puzzling about the entire thing. The puzzlement is a real problem, but it certainly doesn't slow us down. The frustration is a huge problem. It does slow us down. We do get frustrated, but there's never any doubt, A, that we're absolutely right in what we're trying to do, and B, that this is all about not politics and not bigotry and not anything except justice. And justice is a pretty powerful message. If you don't have justice, you don't have a society.
So there are tens of thousands of people that are watching now and will watch this when we're finished. It will be available for people to share and to watch into the future. I know that there are people out there that can help, that maybe didn't know, that didn't know at all, that learned new things today. And by the end of our program today, we'll talk about ways that people can help even further. But I know there are people watching right now that can help elevate this story and this struggle for justice. So think about it, everybody. I'm talking to you. I am talking to you. What can you do to elevate this story further and help? Arnold, we know that you have worked with Department of Justice and State Department. What can you tell us about that piece of it?
I think it'd be smart for me not to tell you everything that I know, because I've no intention of making anyone hostile to what we're trying to do. I want everybody to be on our side. So as I make that statement, let me make the obvious next statement, which is we're not trying to persuade the Jordanians. This has nothing to do with trying to persuade the Jordanians. The Jordanians know what they have to do. They're not going to do it until the American government tells them that they must do it. And there's no reason on earth why the American government can't pick up the phone today or send a letter to the people who run Jordan. It's a family business. The address is very clear, and say, we want her on the flight that leaves at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So setting that aside, what we need to do is move public opinion in the United States. And I'm not laying out a recipe for how this happens. I'm simply making the point that unless the media gives some coverage, it's going to be very difficult. Social media is a powerful tool, but without social media and mainstream media and lots of people talking, you don't get people in the Congress doing what they can do to move the executive of the United States, the people in the White House and in the State Department and the Department of Justice, to take the next moves. What I can say, and I say it in a pretty confident way, is there's nothing lacking in what the Department of Justice have done. They've prepared the case. The case is all stitched up and ready to go. That doesn't mean that she's convicted. She has to stand trial. But that's not where the gap is. The gap is that the Jordanians, who keep saying nothing, they're not even saying, no, we won't hand her over. They're saying nothing, have to be persuaded that this is something that's very wrong, and that Americans, and in particular a values-driven government, which is what I'm reading is the self-description of the Biden administration, and I'm inspired by it. Values-driven government won't allow them to simply brush over, sweep under the carpet, ignore the reality of a murderer who's become famous in their country thanks to the government allowing her to become a terrorist celebrity.
What is it that you have that people can do to participate? You have a petition.
We have a petition which is directed at the Secretary of State of the United States. If I can just read the address of it, it's easy to.
Sure.
It's www.change.org/extradite Tamimi, one word, extradite Tamimi after the change.org. And people who go there now will see that there are quite some thousands of signatures already there. You don't have to be an American. We want as many signatures as we can get. And at some point, we want to point out to the media in the United States, look how many people know about this issue. How come the people who read or watch or embrace the news that you put out haven't heard a word from you? And that would be a good thing to do. If I could just say one other brief thing, this really is about moving the Congress so that if people have the ability to speak to their own representatives in the Congress, it would be important for them. It would be important for the members of the Congress to hear that there are people who are really upset about the way in which justice, in our case of an American child whose life was really trampled before she reached her 16th birthday, no justice has been done. The murderer has made a brilliant, beautiful career to be proud of on the back of those murders. It's a horrifying thing.
And I believe there were other Americans murdered that day.
Yes, there were. There was a young woman who was her parents' only child, family from Los Angeles. I'm deliberately not saying their name, not because they don't want me to mention their name. They're wonderful people. They lost their only child, and she was pregnant with her first child. You don't need to have much imagination to understand the kind of grief and awful outcomes that I'm describing. There's also a third American woman, a young mother, who didn't die, isn't dead, but she's been in a vegetative coma through all the years since the 9th of August, 2001. She was there with a toddler daughter who is now a mother of her own child, and she has parents and she has a husband, and she's not even listed in the death toll. This is another American woman. There were American victims who were injured either inside the pizzeria or simply walking by at that busy intersection in the center of Jerusalem. So the American dimension to this is real and large, and despite it all, it's really been ignored by American public opinion and by the American media. And I don't have any good explanations, Roz, for why this is. Hopefully the efforts of Stand With Us will help to correct that.
So the question is, what can people do besides signing your petition, and so that they can get involved even a little bit? We know that it helps if people call the White House, and so we're going to put that number on the screen. You can call and just leave a message there saying that, it's important that that Ahlam Tamimi be extradited from Jordan, brought to justice here in the United States. It's very simple. It's a very simple request. Right, Arnold?
It's even simpler than the way you're saying it, Roz. It's the United States must press Jordan to hand her over. There's every reason, legal and treaty and diplomatic, why this should happen, and there's no reason why it's been allowed to remain in this strange state for so many years. So yes, the White House is an excellent address to convey the message of the United States must demand that Jordan hands this murderer, this savage terrorist, over for justice in the United States. The
savage terrorist who's proud of her work, who's so proud of her work. So it will just take you a minute to leave a message, and we encourage you to do so. I will do that after the show today. I've done it before, but I'll do it again. Arnold, tell us a little bit about the Mulkey Foundation.
With pleasure. Can I speak for an hour at this point? Mulkey Foundation was our way of memorializing Mulkey's life. Again, against the fear that she would simply be a statistic and forgotten. Mulkey was passionate about her youngest sister, who was blind as a result of a catastrophic turn of events when she was a year old, blind and completely disabled, and lives with us. She's now 26 years old. Mulkey adored her. Mulkey would carry her into her own bed, into Mulkey's bed, just so that her little sister could feel the warmth of somebody who loved her. She never heard Mulkey never heard her little sister's voice. She's never spoken. And as I said, she's blind. The Mulkey Foundation exists to give support to families who are doing what we're doing. And there are lots of us. They want to raise a child with severe disabilities at home, surrounded by loving siblings and parents in a loving environment. It's much more of a challenge than perhaps people would realize. And if they want to know where the challenges are, www.kerenmalki, KERENMALKI.org. We're a registered charity in the United States, as well as in the United Kingdom and in Australia and in Israel. And everybody's support will go a very long way. We do terrific work. I'm the honorary chairman, which means I don't work for the organization. I simply oversee the work of some really excellent small team of excellent doers and activists.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us that opportunity to be part of that. Thank you for telling us the story today and lifting that whole memory again so that we could be part of it and put our hands on it by signing the petition, by calling the White House, by staying involved and staying aware of this, because there's work to be done. And I know you know that better than anybody else. So thank you, Arnold, so much for being with us today and being so articulate, so honest, so raw with your feelings. We appreciate it and are most grateful.
More power to you, Roz. I'm very pleased that you've done this, and may it be crowned with success.
Yes, thank you. Our next live show will be on Sunday, April 25th, when we will be joined by Senator Joe Lieberman. Don't forget, we're live this time every second Sunday, and between those live Sundays, watch the great shows you've missed, like our interviews with Ambassador Michael Oren, Tracy Ann Oberman, Colonel Richard Kemp, Professor Judea Pearl, Ambassador Danny Danon, or so many others. Go to StandWithUs.tv, where you'll find a ton of great video content available at no cost any time of day. And don't forget, if you love the work of Stand With Us and want to support us, go to StandWithUs.com/donate. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you for standing with us, and shalom from Stand With Us.